Live.
Okay, we're Senate Education Committee on February 5th. We're back after a break. And the last order of business for the day is to hear from our kind of annual report from the University of Vermont, but maybe more important or equally important, meet the new president. The full committee has not done that yet. So
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share information with you. And I understand that you all have my slide deck. Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'd love to walk through all the slides with you. It's the one that's 16 pages. So the second image that you see has information about our.
Actually, first thing you do is introduce yourself.
Oh, pardon me. I'm Marlene Trump, president of the University of Vermont, for the record. Thank you so much.
And actually, why don't you just take a minute and give the committee, because have you met everybody in the committee at this point?
I would love to have a chance.
Yes, just why don't you just take a few minutes and we met in Bennington.
Wonderful, yes.
And just tell us a little about yourself, because that's part of what we want to do today.
All right, I'm glad to. Thank you for that opportunity. I grew up in Wyoming, and I actually have been really struck by how much Wyoming has become Vermont, with some very obvious differences right now at this particular moment in time. Very independent-minded people, very hardworking and humble people, a sense of independence, a sense of the specialness of the community. And when I was doing an alumni event in Stowe last spring, I had Christina Von Trapp standing behind me, and I said, I do think there is something about the hard winter that makes people think about community differently. And she leapt up and said, yes, it does. It makes people think differently about community. And what I said was, you have to think differently about community when you've grown up in a place where your care for your neighbor could make a difference in life and death. So, which doesn't mean people don't care about community in other places, but I think it's fundamental to a place like Vermont. I've served at universities across the country. I was a dean at Arizona State. I was the provost at UC Santa Cruz, California. I was the president for 6 years at Boise State University in Idaho. And I am now so proud to be in the state of Vermont.
You started this job
in July 1st. So I was my official start date.
Okay.
I arrived in May. I came with my family, and I had the privilege of moving into the president's home right across the street from the university, where they had not appointed an interim president after the president left. So I was in the office every day beginning in May. But my official start date was July 1st.
Okay.
So do you want me to dive in?
I think that's anybody else. Any background questions from anybody?
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that opportunity. So in the slide deck, the second slide that I have for you just gives some facts on our enrollment. And most people know we are the flagship land-grant university in the state. But what I think is worth mentioning is that land-grant universities, the idea was conceived by Justin Morrill, our own senator from Vermont in the 19th century. And what a lot of people don't know is that Lincoln signed the Land-Grant Act into law during the Civil War, because when the nation was being torn apart, what Justin Morrill saw was you have to invest in education, because that helps the state and the country thrive. So at a time of crisis, he said, this is where we have to put our energy. And as we live in another moment of national crisis, I think that's something I think about every day, is what our land-grant mission is. And so these land-grant universities were founded across the country to serve their states. And the language of the act says that it will serve the sons and daughters of farmers and mechanics. And it was meant that the most privileged people in every state were imagined to go to all the privates, the elite privates that have existed for hundreds of years. And UVM is 234 years old. But these elite privates that just took the wealthiest and the most privileged. The land-grant university system was meant to serve the state. So my vision for the university is that we not be the college on the hill that feels far removed from people across the state, but that we serve all Vermonters in the state of Vermont in everything that we do. So a lot of the figures that I share with you as we go through this step will explain how we're doing that and what I hope to do more of. So on the next page, you'll see a list of our program offerings. We have hundreds of different academic programs, from bachelor's degrees to PhDs, and certificates that allow people to up credential in their place of work. And so that gives you the full range of the comprehensive research university, whether you want to study medicine or English, whether you want to study social work or nursing. There's a whole range of options for people to study. On the next image, you'll see that some details on our Vermont students. We have nearly 4,000 Vermont students at the University of Vermont. What a lot of people don't know is that a third of those students are Pell eligible. And what that means is that they federally qualify for Pell grants, which is free aid from the federal government, that they're socioeconomically disadvantaged enough that the federal government's not giving them a loan, but money they don't have to pay back to attend college. So 32% of those Vermonters are Pell eligible. And 18% of them are first generation, like I was, where the entire trajectory of your family's future can be transformed by that college graduate. So my dad was a coal miner and trona miner. And my son has had a very different life and will have a very different future than most of the people in my that were the second generation from my father's will have. The next image tells you a little bit about what we're doing to help those Vermonters come to school. I had the privilege of being at a higher ed conference recently. We have one of the most generous programs in the country for students in terms of in-state students getting tuition support. So if your family makes less than $100,000 a year, you can, and you're a Vermonter, you can come to UVM tuition free. That's one of the most generous programs in the country. Even places like Yale historically have only had 50,000 for their families. So family incomes less than 100,000 paying no tuition at UVM. 48% of those students get direct financial support from the university in order to do that. And more than half of the state appropriation funding that we get goes directly to those students for their support so they can come to school at UVM.
Just to be sure I'm clear about, when you say tuition, does that mean they still pay for board?
It does, but we have other programs that help support students who have financial need for those. So the tuition is guaranteed, and then we can help students with funding for all those other parts of the program. I'm really proud, and I learned this after I got here, that for every Vermonter we graduate, 2 out-of-state students live and work in Vermont after they graduate. And that's an extraordinary impact on the state with an upside down demographic. So as you all probably know, because of the impacts on things like education and healthcare that you all are wrangling with right now, we have what's called an upside down demographic. Typically or historically, there'd be fewer older people and more younger people in a state. But our demographic has flipped and we have more older people and fewer young people. So this impact in the state is tremendous. Having those young people with their energy, their ideas, their ability to serve as our teachers and our healthcare workers in the state, it's critical to the well-being of our workforce, but also of the well-being of our people in the state. And what we see is,
I can ask a question here out of the, how many take, do you know how many go to private industry and how many take like a government job?
I don't know the answer to that question, but we can see if we have that data. Wendy, can we?
I will follow up.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much. And a part of what you'll see here too on the next slide is that right now we have over 35,000 alumni that are working in the video. So that's making a tremendous impact on the workforce in the state. On the next slide, you'll see a data point that a lot of people don't understand the meaning of when they first see it, because it tends to be sort of this esoteric higher ed phenomenon. We have been recently designated an R1 university, and the Carnegie Foundation evaluates research universities based on the strength, breadth, and impact of their research. Only 3% of institutions in the entire country are designated R1s, and UVM is now in that ranking because of the expansiveness of our research and the impact of our research. And I'm going to talk to you in just a moment about what that research does for the state of Vermont. But this designation will help us recruit top faculty. It will help us attract top students, because students want the opportunity of being able to engage with research while they're there. Does this mean that there's a fire?
I mean, the house is called to the floor.
When you didn't explain the bell.
She did, but I didn't know what the sound was.
Different, the bell's slightly different, Senate, saying.
And she showed me the color.
Yeah.
It's
You can see it right up here on the wall.
Ah, okay, thank you.
So the R1 designation came because of the quality of the program.
The quality and expansiveness of our research program. And you'll see on the next slide, we were named by the Princeton Review #1 in best schools for making a social impact.
Yeah.
So our students come to UVM because of its commitment to making social positive impact in the world. It's often why people that are out of state choose us, because they know that's a part of who we are. And our MBA program was named #1 in the US, #2 in the world for MBAs that are making a social impact. So we graduate students who want to make the world a better place. And that's why they come to Vermont, and it's why they come to UVM. So we're very proud of that alignment with our state, and that students choose us for that reason. And you'll see on the next two images, I'll talk a little bit about the work that we're doing in research. The first image it tells you that we have, in the last fiscal year, we brought $225 million into the state for that research. And that research, there's an image on this slide of research that's happening out on Lake Champlain. We had the first ever purpose-built electric research vessel in the world, the Marcel Melisera. And that vessel does research that's changing what we understand about lake ecology and about the environment around lakes. In fact, we just had a researcher discover something that it's intellectually fascinating. It sounds like a great premise for a terrifying movie. That amongst fish, cancers are actually transmissible, communicable. And her research is going through final reviews right now to be published. So you're hearing about it even before it's being published. But understanding that biology and that biochemistry will help us avoid that possibility in humans. So it's really path-breaking research that's happening right here on Lake Champlain.
I used to go out on a
On the
much
Marcel.
smaller one. That was a little bit scary. California.
It's amazing the kind of work that's happening on that research vessel and on the lake. You will probably know about the VGAM Tech Hub because the legislature generously gave support for the VGAM Tech Hub. And I'll tell you a little bit about my experience in history with the semiconductor industry. When I was president in Idaho, we were in the home of Micron Industries, which is one of the largest semiconductor producers in the world. And during the pandemic, you may recall how difficult it was to get technology. It's hard to get a phone, a computer, but it was also hard to get appliances. Like if you needed a new refrigerator, that was hard to get because all of this technology now has semiconductors in it. And part of the reason that the CHIPS and Science Act was signed, and I had the privilege of being at the G7 summit for that signing because of my partnership around the semiconductor industry. Part of the reason that act was built federally was to ensure that we were producing semiconductors in the US, so we weren't dependent on a foreign supply chain to make technology in the US. This path-breaking work in gallium nitride semiconductors will make those semiconductors lighter and smaller so that the space shuttle will weigh less, so that your phone will weigh less, so that the technology in a vehicle will add less weight and be more flexible. So it's really path-breaking technology, and we're going to be able to produce the students who are going to work in that industry, but also help make discoveries in that industry. And you may recall that a little over a year ago, we were awarded $20 million by the federal government. And that was a part of the federal government's funding that was frozen in the federal freeze of research funding. And they pulled back on that grant, which shocked me a little bit because that's about American economic development and independence. And so I was surprised that was one of the things that was cut. But they've reinitiated that grant process. And we've been through 3 layers of review, and all 5 parts of our grant have now gone forward. So keep watching the news for that Began Tech Hub, because it could bring tens of millions of dollars more into the state for this work that the legislature has already helped support that will help this industry thrive in the state. On the next page, you'll see biolabs.
So if we get understanding right, so you will be drawing tens of millions of dollars in because industry will want to support the work.
Because the federal government will help fund it because it will be so transformative. Yeah, so it's federal funding. Biolabs is an entity that helps take medical research and scientific research from universities and brings it to application out in the world. So you may have a great finding, but if you're a research professor that's coming up with the technology, you may not know how to bring it out into the world beyond the university. So Biolabs is an entity that helps it's called translation, translate that research out into the real world so it gets out to the healthcare community, to consumers. And Biolabs partnered with UVM to create the first ever rural biolabs in the United States, right in Burlington. So they're helping us take all of those medical findings, all those scientific findings, and get that research into the hands of people who can use it. And so we've helped partner to bring that forward so we can make an impact on the state. And on the next slide, I'll give you one specific example of how you're doing it. And if you're looking at it right now, you'll see a very creepy picture of a tick. And one of the things that our research team is working on in healthcare is a vaccine against tick-borne illnesses, tick-borne diseases. And people often, when they get bit by ticks, aren't even aware that they're carrying tick-borne illnesses, and it can cause very serious health effects down the road. This vaccine could transform the care for people in areas that have tick-borne illness, like Lyme disease. And it's the same research lead who developed the RSV vaccine. You may have heard of RSV. Cold viruses, COVID vaccines, you may hear that that's often mentioned in the same breath, the RSV vaccine. It's for most people who are young like you are,
I'm so
RSV,
young anymore.
RSV might feel like a cold. But for people who are my age and older, or people who are very young, like children and infants, it can be deadly. And the RSV vaccine has reduced infant hospitalization since it was developed 5 years ago by 80% worldwide. So it's had a huge impact on health and well-being across the world. And it's that same research lead that's working on this tick-borne illness vaccine. And then you'll see in the next slide, it's not just about the research findings, it's also about that helping our workforce. We want to produce more nurses, more folks who are working in social work, more folks who are working in phlebotomy, in cancer care, across the state, across the region. And I'm very proud to share with you that we just got a $16 million gift to help reduce the costs to students who want to study nursing at UVM. So we're hoping that it will really reduce the financial barriers for those nursing students. On the next slide, you'll see, and I'm trying to talk fast so I leave time for questions, our fiscal year requests. These mirror precisely the ones that were in the governor's budget. but I want to take just a moment to explain them. So the first thing we asked for is a 3% inflationary increase for the general fund appropriation, and that's going to do three things. It will allow us to continue to maintain levels of need-based aid for Vermont students. It will fund the ongoing discounting for Vermonters at the Larner College of Medicine. And many of our medical college graduates stay and practice medicine in Vermont. And it will allow us to continue support for our extension branch so that programs can continue to thrive across all 14 counties. And I have made it a point since I came here. Within a month and a half, I had set foot in every county in the state of Kansas. And I've met with people from across the state. I want the entire university, the power of the whole research university, to reach out across the state, not just extension. The second item is $1 million a year for 5 years to support the UVM Cancer Center's expansion of programs in rural communities. My sister is being treated for cancer in our UVM healthcare right now. And when we go to have her infusions, we often meet people who have traveled 2 hours, 2.5 hours to come and get their treatment in Burlington. And what we want to do is reach out with that cancer care so that we're touching more parts of the state and we can reduce the number of times and the impact on families when they have to get in the car and drive to come and get their health care. And then a $15 million investment in our multi-purpose center. And I'm happy to explain the history of that if you'd like to understand more about that. The idea behind that multi-purpose center, the governor's sensibility of that was we needed to ensure that our state had an appropriate indoor venue for events, for programs, for concerts, entertainment, for athletics. And it would be one of the largest of its kind in the state. It would allow us to welcome Vermonters from across the state. It would also provide wellness facilities for our students. And historically, and there are people in the room who've lived through this, in 2019, that project was funded and approved by our board of trustees. The work began on the project, the foundations were poured, the steel was purchased and fashioned, and then the pandemic hit. And in the time, we had all the funding assembled, we were ready to finish that project. When the pandemic hit and the governor halted all construction, the project cost escalated so much by the time that we were able to resume work that we couldn't afford the project. And so the governor wanted to stimulate the return to the project. Our student government has come to us with a resolution asking us to complete the project. And in part because of the governor's willingness to support the project from the state, we've had 2 donors come forward who have very generously committed to the project. You may be aware that Rich Tarrant recently passed away, and he had made a bequest to the project. His sons have committed at least 15 and perhaps as much when they stayed as settled as $20 million towards that project. And Chuck Davis, in honor of Rich Tarrant's memory, has committed to match that gift. So in total, with if the legislature sees fit, that would bring us to 55. The total cost of the project, it was originally $100 million.
Well, in 2008, it was even less than that, and then the recession put it on hold. And it's
Yes,
been a long time.
it's been a lot. There are a lot of people who've invested a lot of time and energy in making this project a reality for a long time. And we invested over 70 million in the project, and then the project stalled. And in that cost escalation now, the new money, which would have been 30 million if we'd been able to finish, is now 100 million. So this would bring us more than halfway with all of these commitments. And I have already met with and discussed some other very generous gifts. And even next week, I'm getting on a plane to go meet with other donors to ask them for commitments to this project. And my hope is to philanthropically fund the entire project so that we can preserve our debt capacity for our academic facilities on campus. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions that you.
Did you say that ground was broken on that project before COVID hit?
In 2019, and the foundations were poured and steel was,
Okay, so foundations poured and steel and sitting.
it was manufactured, was fabricated, and the pieces are sitting in a storage facility right next to campus, right now.
Okay, so
Yeah,
Senator Hershey.
Thank you. So promise I'm not the negative person on the committee, but
Who would that be?
my initial reaction during the government's budget address, and also I'm very happy to keep an open mind and learn more as well. But you know, I had a very visceral reaction in hearing the governor's budget address and the money for the stadium or a multi-purpose center. And, you know, for example, earlier today, we were hearing about the health insurance, healthcare costs for folks, school construction costs as well. And so it's, you know, initially it's a tough pill to swallow, the idea of 50 million when we're also dealing with all these other, you know, essential factors like healthcare and, you know, school construction and housing and so on. But I mean, fully supportive of all the other asks that you have here, and but that's just my initial gut reaction. But again, happy to keep an open mind.
thank you for that. I think that's an extraordinary thing. People are looking to hear more. And if I may, I would love to have Wendy talk a little bit about the way that the governor had envisioned the
Mhm.
financing.
Yeah, so you know that it's
So
coming.
for the record,
For the record, I'm Wendy Koenig. I work for President Trump, doing government relations for UVM. So I think that one of the reasons that he chose this money coming from the higher ed trust fund, so that it would impact the general fund. And that the trust fund had quite a windfall of new money to it this year. And so using that money to support higher education would be appropriate.
And it's a Senate government operations decision how the higher ed trust fund gets used. And it's a one-time windfall, so
Right.
it's. I went around the bend on it too, and I wrote, you know, part of the report on creating this facility almost 20 years ago. But it does feel like a lot of money, and at the same time, it'd be hard to spend that one-time money on something that people were counting on in the future from the higher ed trust fund. So I come around.
And more than sounds like a lot. It is fun.
It is a lot of money, and we've asked for someone to come in and talk to Senate Economic Development about it, because we had just come to some culmination of a advisory group on having a multi-purpose center near the airport. It's something that is an economic detractor all the time for conferences and large events, is that we don't have anything of that scale anywhere in the state, but particularly near the airport.
So this one-time money, it's up, like you said, we windfall from the federal government?
No, a state.
It's an estate tax.
So the higher ed trust fund has been around since the year 2000,
All right.
and it's funded when the state projects how much they'll get in estate tax every year. If they meet 125% of their estimate, then the overage goes into the higher ed trust fund. And so this year there was someone whose estate was quite large, and there was a large amount of money that went into the trust fund because of that.
And it otherwise gets divided between the three institutions, VSAC, state colleges, and UVM.
So it's an endowment that spins off money from what it earns every year. If the earnings are appropriate, then UVM, the Vermont State College System, and VSAC are able to take a portion of up to 5%.
How much went into the higher ed trust fund? Does anybody?
This year
Yeah.
was 26 million. Additional.
Thank you. That makes sense. That's
That helped me a lot.
In fact, some of our faculty asked about this, and one of the things I shared with them was just this: it's not general fund money, so it's not impacting the kind of budget that would, you know, that people would be using to solve healthcare or K-12 issues. And because the idea behind it stimulating the economy of the state, and Wendy, I believe that you explained that we were just invited to come to that committee, is that correct?
Yeah, so we tried to come today,
This morning.
but the schedule wouldn't accommodate it, so, the committee assistant told me that, she would reach back out to me with another time, but I haven't heard about it yet.
And when you have a facility that already has so many of the parts, you know, we've got this foundation, we've got this steel, we're ready to roll. And when it has the added benefit of bringing young people onto a college campus so they can imagine a future at university, that's something you can't get in another kind of facility.
And I mean, this is a bit of an aside, it's not a critical need, but when we started this campus life task force too, the first one was the student center at UVM, and this was the second. Even then, it was embarrassing to see the facilities that are Division I athletic students operate in. I mean, and I don't think it's changed very much.
Oh, I often say that we have the most beautiful high school gym.
Yeah. Maybe not even the most beautiful high school.
Yeah,
But
maybe
I
not.
think that's what we said at the time, and that was 20 years ago. So it is getting to the point where you can't have swimming competitions in a natatorium of that
Our pool is not regulated,
regulation size.
so we can't host state competitions in our pool at all.
So is that gonna change with this? Or is
That won't change, but a lot of the other elements of the facility will change.
Shouldn't have brought it up, but do you know what the hope, the desired capacity would be of the largest event space?
I think you,
It's about 5,000.
so that would be one of the largest indoor venues in the entire state.
Yeah, what's larger?
I think the capacity is similar at the indoor spaces at the expo, but they're
Oh, right.
sort of divided. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Yes,
Thank you for coming to brief us. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
I have two questions. So the same questions I asked Vermont State University Assistant President or Chancellor. when She came in. One is, can you just give us an overview of your student population trend over the past decade or so? Stable, whatever. Yeah, so student population and applications, just to give us a sense of how.
Sure. So right now, we have chosen to remain stable in our student population. So we're not trying to grow. We recognize that housing is a critical issue, not just in Burlington, but across the state. And so we're trying to think creatively about those challenges as well. And so we're not aiming to grow that undergraduate population, and we are stable. What we are seeing across the country is that flagship universities continue to do well, while regional state schools are really struggling. So we've seen that pattern. It's not just in Vermont, it's everywhere across the country. Community colleges tend to do a little better. It's the state regionals that tend to struggle. So land grants tend to do better. And that's partly because we attract a broader range of students from around the country. People who are coming for the research that's happening there, for the experience of the public land grant. So our demographic trends are, in terms of our student population, we did increase over time, and that was in part to manage holding tuition flat for 5 years, which the university did for 5 years. It had to incrementally grow to cover the incremental costs. So when healthcare costs went up, people's salaries had to increase with inflation. There had to be additional revenue coming in if you're holding tuition flat. Now, if your tuition goes up incrementally, just like inflationary costs do, then you don't have to grow your population. So we did grow the student population, but now we feel we're right size. And so our aim is not to grow like a behemoth, like Arizona State, which now has, if you can believe it, 170,000 students.
oh
Oh my God.
I thought it was like 50.
Yeah. Um, we don't have any aspiration to be a behemoth like that. What we aim to do is to ensure that we're giving Vermonters access, that we have a stable population of students, and that we're finding those right students who are the right fit for Vermont and UVM, no matter where they are in the country. So that's the story of our demographics.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Applications.
They're stable.
See.
Yeah, and that's actually, I will say, that's pretty extraordinary because most places are not stable. They're seeing a decline.
Second question is, in your presentation, you highlighted that roughly 50% of Vermont undergrads are tuition free,
Yes.
which is great. I want to dovetail this into, I'm sure you're aware of McClure Foundation's analysis of jobs in the state where we have the greatest need. It highlights salaries, number of openings over the next period of time. And I wanted to get your comment on the fact that we're providing half of our students tuition free, to identify the needs, the labor, higher skill labor needs of the state, but there's no dovetailing between the two. There's no obligation for those receiving tuition free to either stay in the state or the state treasury that we dedicate to these scholarships are focused on those job openings, which McClure Foundation has highlighted. Can you react to that?
Yeah, I think what we've seen nationally that has made an impact on things like that is access to housing and workforce forum partners and family. And so what we see with our VSET just did a study of this with UVM grads to see how long they stayed in the state after they came. And what they found is when you hit about that 12 or 15 year mark, when people's families start growing and they're trying to buy a house, and that's when people start to ask, should we go? And so what we know as a university is that we have to be a part of solving in partnership with our municipalities, state government, with nonprofits, with industry partners around the state. We have to take as one of our fundamental responsibilities, how do we support those efforts to ensure that there's affordable, available housing? And when in my last role, one of the things that I did is I was in partnership with the city to help create low cost housing in the city. So we actually were in the process of preparing to build a shared project that would allow us to take some of the pressure off the housing market, because when you take some pressure off, it has a ripple effect across the housing. And so in partnership with Vermont State Colleges, I've talked with Beth Knock about this, the chancellor, and I just met with Joyce Judy about this at CCB. What we'd like to do is think about how we can help our students get internships or co-ops around the state and utilize some of, for example, the Vermont State College's available housing and house people across the state so that they're bringing their talents to other places in the state, imagining other possibilities about where they could live and raise a family. And that we're taking some more pressure off the housing market locally. So those issues of who stays and how long they remain and in what careers are being tremendously impacted by things like available housing and cost of healthcare insurance is one of the other issues too. So the more we help work on those pressures, the more of those people I think will stay. Now, in terms of workforce development, I am really excited if our plan gets approved, which it will go. If you look at our strategic plan, and if you Google UVM strategic plan, it'll be the first thing that comes up. You can see a draft plan. That goes before our trustees this week. If they approve that plan, we will develop metrics that will ask about our workforce commitment. And we'll actually begin to measure the impact we're making on producing people who can live in industries that have high need around the state. That's part of the reason, for example, that $16 million gift in nursing was so important, because we need to train those nurses to have available nurses around the state. We don't have enough nurses. There's a nursing shortage. We also know that for new industries where we don't have the demand yet, but if we want to help support the growth of the economy, we'll need more engineers graduating to go work in that gallium nitride semiconductor industry. And that's not a need yet, but we know that's going to be an economic stimulus. And so we want to ensure that we're training those students to get out into the workforce too. So what we'll do, should our board approve this, and I suspect they will, they've already seen several drafts and worked with us on it. If they approve this, we'll begin to develop metrics, and I will bring those before you next year when we come to look at the match between what we're producing and how that's impacting our workforce.
Thank you.
Yes.
So several weeks ago, we participated in a forum at the Castle State University. And they're talking about the need for nurses. It was a couple of years ago now. One of the problems they were having was for the nursing program was coming up with a instructor that was for the master program. So is there any way you can help them with that? Have you?
Well, the partnership that we have talked about, that the biggest bottleneck in nursing is clinical placements. So nursing accreditation requires that nurses go out on live rotations so you can work in a sim lab, which is where you have a human model, right? And you get to experience doing blood pressure and things like that. But you need to have real live experiences and be in a healthcare system, in a hospital. The nursing accreditation nationally requires that there be a certain number of students only with an instructor. And that is a huge bottleneck, because when you have a nursing shortage, it means you also have a shortage of people who can be supervisors to those nursing students, which means you would love to admit every student who wants to be a nurse, but you have to have clinical placements for them to get them through the curriculum. So if we are able to produce those nurses and get them to stay in the state, that will help us grow the number of clinical placements. And what I've said to the chancellor is the more we partner on nursing production, the more we help each other. So we are committed to building a partnership on that front, but it's going to be a challenge. And we may actually have to partner regionally. We already do in the south of the state, partner regionally across states, but especially in rural communities, this is an enormous challenge. So we know we're going to need to increase our partnerships and look for ways that we can, if we send someone to a clinical placement in New York, we want them to come back.
Mhm.
And so part of the question is, what are the incentives that help them to come back? And I would be willing to bet when we do our research on this, what we will discover is that it's about housing and care, not about a desire. I bumped in the cafeteria, bumped into a group of legislative interns that are all current UVM students. And I had one of the young women in that group tell me, so they were telling me what they were majoring in, what, where they came from. And one of the young women was from New York. And she said, when she told her family that she was going to go to UVM, they threw up their arms and said, "You'll never come back to Vermont. Everybody wants to live in Vermont." And our students do. We want to stay. We have to help solve problems that are making it difficult for them to remain.
One more. Do you offer housing for married students?
Do you know that
I know St. Mike's does.
I think that is something that no longer exists. I
But we
think,
do have Catamount Run.
yeah, we have housing that we have recently developed in South Burlington
It's new.
that's targeted at graduate students, faculty and staff. So many of those students who are graduate students
Have
may be married or have families, and there's 1, 2, or 3 bedroom apartments in that development.
That's a new facility that we just opened.
So talk a little bit more about what you're doing to help with housing, because then you talked about utilizing like facilities at some of the state colleges that want to use, but how does that help the students going to the campus? So how,
It takes pressure off of our housing loan.
oh, no, I get that part, but how do they, that drive back in?
Oh, what we would do is, what we are envisioning right now, and we have to get our plan approved before we can act on these things, but we're so close now. We've been going through a long process for this. And I'll just mention as an aside, we had 54 listening sessions. 1,000 people participated in shaping that plan on campus. And we reached out to municipalities across the state, partners in industry, partners in nonprofits, all of our alumni, and we had a huge open rate on the plan. We got feedback online too, so we had a lot of participation in the plan. But if that plan gets approved, what we will begin to do is each unit will build metrics around what they're trying to achieve and how we're going to achieve these things. And a co-op program would send students away for 4 to 6 months. And so it would vacate their housing on campus for that period. And what a co-op is designed to do is be more expansive and broad than an internship. And I showed up at this gorgeous campus in the summer, and it was like a ghost town. There was almost nobody there. And if we build a robust co-op program, what that will allow us to do is offer some summer classes for students. And it's especially if we're efficient about how we do it. Like, for example, if we say you're going to go on a co-op in your sophomore year, and we send those students out, then we only have to offer those sophomore year classes in the summer and not every single part of the curriculum and every single major during the summer. And if we send students out, they get that professional work experience. The number one complaint nationally that employers have about college graduates is they've never been in the workplace before. And so if we give them that professional experience, it also changes how they understand what they're learning in the classroom. You get a different perspective on what you're studying, seeing how it can be applied. And so if we can build a co-op program, that'll take enormous pressure off our housing. Imagine a huge number of students being out located all across the state for 6 months out of the year, giving in those economies in that part of the state. But we have to build something that's robust, and it will take us a little time. And we have to have the cooperation of our faculty to make this happen. But I really think their enthusiasm and excitement about this prospect suggests to me that we'll be able to do it in short.
And didn't the Trinity campus project get restarted or no?
We weren't about to, but that is dependent on City of Arlington.
Really, it's still dependent on Burlington. Let me know. I can help. Oh, thank you. That was a frustration to
Yeah.
not have 400 units built.
We had intended to build the former Trinity College campus that is now one of our campuses, and it has residential buildings and also some classrooms. The buildings were dilapidated, took over that campus, and we wanted to renew those buildings and create more housing for our students. And we were prevented by the city from doing so. They wouldn't give us the permitting to do for them.
That was 3 years ago, maybe.
It's been an ongoing issue for.
Yeah, I feel for some reason I thought we could track, but I'm happy to try and help because that would alleviate a lot of housing pressure in Burlington.
Yeah, and actually the last plan was to build about 1,000 units there.
Really?
There would be graduate housing there underground.
There you go.
Bless you.
Okay, since you said it, what the reason was? Thank you.
We need zoning amendments in order to build it, and we were not given those zoning
Okay.
permissions from the city.
Okay. So going back to the co-op model, which is now I understand what you're actually talking about, you're really talking about beginning to, I'm sure it's already going on to some extent, but changing the traditional arrive in August, done in May, and then have it be an element of year round, but with some other things going on. It keeps just, yeah. I mean, I know what's going on in some fashion already, but that's still interesting.
And one of the things that just recently happened is one of our generous philanthropic donors funded in the Grossman School of Business a co-op program for the college so that students can go and do their co-op with the support of this fund that this donor created so that it reduces their costs and expenses and the employer's costs and expenses. They're able to go out and get that professional work experience. So we have a lot of enthusiasm and support for making it a reality. And there are some interesting models out there. Northeastern has co-ops for every student, Northeastern College, and Western University in Ontario has 3 co-ops for every student before they graduate. And they have one of the highest job placement rates in the world for graduates. Now, ours is pretty darn good. 96% of students, isn't this right, Wendy? 96% are working in an area that they've chosen.
Mhm.
6 months after graduation, 96%. It's a very high placement rate. And as you may have heard in the national news that there are a lot of students that are struggling to find jobs right now. So that makes that placement rate even more impressive.
I mean, besides just saying, I think we're so lucky to have you. Thank you from Paramount. I'm really excited about the mobile healthcare unit. We're a rural state. Maine has a lot of mobile healthcare visits, farm workers and people who 25% of our state, according to the UVM Transportation Research Center, they cannot get to a doctor's appointment on time. So I've wanted mobile healthcare for so long. And this is very exciting to me. So thank you to you and the cancer centers full of amazing people. So
Thank you.
very
It's
excited.
certainly- Thank you.
Yeah, let's move on questions. She was fine. You understand about the moles. One thing I was wondering about, when we talked about it was, don't people often just go to other hospitals for, having working with a physician there, but some of the things that have been done on a regular basis at another hospital? So it's just, so why is the global ban not duplicative of that, or is it?
It depends on their needs. So some facilities can offer what people need, and people are in what we'll call their deserts, where they're physically so far from any facility that they end up either not treating their illnesses, or the barrier of getting, like, especially if you're working.
So you can really, like we were talking about, that it's using a van to go to areas where, like, very often in my area, people go to either, they'll maybe working with a physician at medical center, but they then go for part of what's going on to either Bennington or Rutland. You're talking about places where even that's not possible.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what you're talking about.
And
Yeah.
so one of the things that the mobile unit does is, I think we've talked in here before about the fact that Vermont has an unusually high rate of skin cancer, of melanoma. And so one of the things the mobile unit does is do screenings out in rural areas. So if you go to primary care and say, can you do a skin cancer screening on me? The answer is no. They're not a dermatologist. They don't have the necessary qualifications to want to do that from a liability standpoint. But physicians and practitioners can use the mobile unit to do those screenings in rural areas, so people don't have to drive a long way or wait a long period of time necessarily for a specialty appointment. So it's not like a mobile unit can deliver chemotherapy to people.
Right.
Can't do that. But
Okay.
but it can do other things. And we've also got a grant that we've been working on for a number of years with Mississippi State that's about rural healthcare and delivery with things like drones. Can you deliver an iPad to someone and have a telehealth visit with someone by using a drone? There's things like that as well. So interesting innovation.
So important in a very rural.
Yeah, they
Haven't got there.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes people have transportation challenges or childcare challenges.
Yeah.
It can help with things like that.
No, that's.
So if your road's impassable, maybe we can get you an iPad. And be able to do that,
Yeah.
that telehealth appointment, and you can get the consultation. My sister and I met with her oncologist over telehealth just yesterday. It's, even when you're right there, sometimes that's the most convenient thing, especially if somebody's ill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for the privilege of having you here.
Echo some of Ron Sales comment that we're lucky to have you.
Thank you very much.
So, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's great.
Yes, one more.
And if you haven't figured it out by this point, you're also very lucky to have Wendy.
Oh,
here.
Yeah.
I know. Do I know it? I tell her that all the time. I thank my lucky stars.
It's very nice.
Wendy's the best. Thank you so much, everyone.
Good to see you all.
Thanks.